Hey, so right now there are a lot of conversations that are starting to be had about destruction of property and whether or not that is an appropriate form of protest. And we can have a philosophical discussion another day about who gets to decide what is or isn't an appropriate form of protest. And the answer is really the winners. Whoever wins gets to decide, right? The Sons of Liberty were freedom fighters, not terrorists. Anyway, as a historian, I'd like to just remind you of a few things or just give you some information you maybe didn't learn in school that would at least help you along in this conversation. Number one, I already sort of referenced it, but the United States was sort of born off the Boston Tea Party. I mean, not literally, but that is arguably one of our most celebrated events of our fight for freedom, is the destruction of corporate property on a massive scale, like millions and millions of dollars of British East India Company tea being thrown into the harbor. Now, to be clear, this wasn't like a labor uprising. This was an uprising by the Sons of Liberty, who were mostly wealthy colonists who were getting wealthier off of their illegal tea trade and just didn't like the competition. But still. Number two, did you ever learn why Nelson Mandela was in prison to begin with? Like, we all probably learned in our world history class that he was freed after being in prison for a few decades and became the first president of post-apartheid South Africa. But why was he in prison to begin with? Well, he was in prison to begin with because of his militant wing of the ANC known as Umkhonto we Sizwe, which basically decided, listen, nonviolent, like civil disobedience is not working against this violent white supremacist government, and so we are going to turn to a campaign of property destruction. In June of 1961, Nelson Mandela sent a letter to South African newspapers warning the government that they would start a campaign of sabotage in the next few months unless the government agreed to call for a national constitutional convention. That didn't happen, and so starting in December of that year, they started launching attacks against like electrical substations, government posts, machines, power facilities. They would burn fields and burn crops. Let me read you part of a speech from Nelson Mandela explaining himself why he shifted his approach from full nonviolence to violence against property, at least. Quote, "It was only when all else had failed, when all channels of peaceful protest had been barred to us, that the decision was made to embark on violent forms of political struggle. We did so not because we desired such a course, but solely because the government had left us with no other choice." And finally, during our own civil rights movement, there were a lot of people, especially the kind of the white moderates that Dr. King was always so frustrated with, that would say like, well, yeah, but why do you have to destroy property? These marches, they have to stay peaceful. We can't have riots, we can't have whatever. Dr. King gave a speech on this. He said, "I'm aware that there are many who wince at a distinction between property and persons, who hold both sacrosanct. My views are not so rigid. A life is sacred. Property is intended to serve life, and no matter how much we surround it with rights and respect, it has no personal being. It is part of the earth man walks on, it is not man." Why were they so violent with property then? Because property represents the white power structure which they were attacking and trying to destroy. A deeper level of hostility came out in arson, which was far more dangerous than the looting, but it too was a demonstration and a warning. It was directed against symbols of exploitation, and it was designed to express the depth of anger in the community. Do with that information what you will.